All right, afternoon everyone. I'm going to get started on the liquid cooling control slide deck I have here. My name is Matt Griff Keller. I've worked with Vertiv for about 11 years, and I originally came over with the Geist acquisition in 2018. Since then, I have been working on environmental monitoring, leak detection, and then coordinating with the controls groups, specifically thermal, power, and several other groups within Vertiv. So really, what is liquid cooling controls? At the basis, it is just making sure we get that coolant directly to those racks and those assets, and then protecting it in case of failure. Well, we do view that in a few different ways. There's just also the CDU to the rack and the IT assets, but there's also the full cooling chain behind that, because you need to make sure that all of these are working together. In addition, the cooling and the power trains really need to work together in coordination, because you are working with, in this case, PG25 right now, or similar PG mixtures. Even when we try to make those non-conductive, they still have conductivity in those. So we do have to make those safe. Of course, why power? Well, again, in single phase setups, there is some risk of shock in the case of a leak. So we do have to make sure there's coordination in there, but they're also providing that power directly to those IT assets. In general, what we're already recommending is outlet level monitored and controlled rack PDUs. And when we have those DC power shelves ready for you that can do that level of control, we're gonna push those as well. But what it can also do is enable specific server shutdown. So if you do have a leak, say at a specific server level, you can go ahead and bring that server down gracefully, while the rest of the workload could continue on until you bring down the rest of the rack. And so what we really look at that is through the infrastructure management and controls. So you have flow rate control, you have multiple different levels of leak detection. We also want to make sure that you can have those pressure drops monitored, because PG25 can be a little bit more viscous. You may also not get leak detections right away, but a pressure drop could be indicative of that. And then you also do have fluid quality issues. So in general, what we've been seeing from the fluid manufacturers is they've gone from a 1-year testing cycle to a 6-month testing cycle. Now they're down to 3 months to do quality checks on those fluids. And that can be from a variety of reasons. You do have cold plate heat exchangers that are made of copper. You can see erosion on those depending on your fluid mixtures and your fluid quality. But that can also cause other issues within the cooling chain. And so we've worked with leak detection for a really long time, probably 25 years at least. A lot of times it is in with our air handling units. We have various different styles. We have rope, we have spot, we have distance read, and now we're starting to bring those into the liquid cooling space for hyper awareness of if there's a leak occurring, where is it occurring? And what this does allow us to do is controls with smart valves to know when we're having an event. And then we can take those actions to actually protect the assets and ensure that there's good shutdown points. We're not damaging the equipment. We're also making sure that the facility is remaining safe. You don't have water pouring out onto the floors, because that becomes a different hazard in itself. And so taking that automation to a different level here. So we generally look at a few different levels, the rack and the server level, so that you can see when that leak is occurring. You can also pull in data points from various levels to get notifications out to your operations team. And I'll go into that a little bit, because there's some differentiation between those of us who own the data center and those of us who are doing colocation. So colocation may have a little bit different scheme as far as the controls, but in general, you're really gonna wanna make sure you get that stuff shut down in case of an event. And then furthermore, if you have those pressure flow rate drops throughout that cooling infrastructure from your room all the way outside, that's all very important, because it can impact what's happening down at that chip level. And so Vertiv does have a variety of CDUs. I'm sure some of you have been to our booth. We didn't have any on display this time because a lot of times they're out with testing with customers. If you do come to Supercompute, we actually will have several on display there. But we do a lot of liquid to liquid, liquid to air, and liquid to refrigerant to handle a vast different workload. With that NVIDIA announcement, that reference design included quite a few of these CDUs in there, and all the way through the power chain, the racks, everything. And our website does actually have a really good reference point for AI 360, which is one of our website subsections, and it has about 15 reference designs on there. Yep, wrong way, sorry. All right, so just kind of going into co-locations and what I say similar concepts, because even within our own setups, you may have different owners of IT racks within your own enterprise or even a hyperscale. So sometimes you kind of have to treat that as a similar colo concept. So in general, of course, the colocation and the customers have a little bit of a separation of duties. And that's very traditional at this point. You know, the customer owns what's in the rack, the colo provides some of the services up until, you know, you hit your bus bar, your distribution centers. But in this case, who starts becoming responsible when you have liquids involved? So what we're seeing is about 3 scenarios roughly right now. So the traditional one, your colo is taking care of everything outside of that rack. Well, that's great because they're doing what they normally do. They still have to provide air cooling right now, by the way. But then what happens in case of failure? So again, liquids, they could be pouring out on the floor. Hopefully we see them before that happens. But if you have those sets at a co-location or a similar space, you need to have a dedicated resource who can respond to those leaks or maintenance events, anything like that. So you start looking at, you know, different scenarios. All right, so the colo could take more responsibility. They may own the CDU or may do maintenance on it. So that gives them a little bit better control over worst case scenarios. You do have an event, they can start taking action, provide feedback, tell you, hey, we need to start moving this stuff offline, get a good save point in there. And then the third one, which is what I call advanced, or, you know, if we're enterprise level or we actually own our own data centers, this is typically what you will see. So you will have full control of that power and cooling, which includes everything from outside to inside, because yes, you do need to know what's going on that full scale. But then that basically means the customer at that point is really owning the equipment only in the racks. So your servers, your storage servers, network switches. But then very importantly, the SLA is probably going to be very interesting at that point. I don't like to get into that. That's the legal aspect of it. But it does become hypercritical when we're working on these workloads. And then also making sure that when you're doing your machine learning or your AI workloads, that those save points actually happen, because seconds matter in some cases. We do know that, you know, a lot of these GPUs, CPUs will have self-protection enabled as well. So what we really look at too is that for the system management, it really has to come all together. You do have to have a mixture of facilities and IT working together, because if you don't, you're going to start losing assets, and nobody wants to lose a $500,000, $1 million server or a $2 million rack. So a lot of times we're going to have, you know, some of it may be automated. At some point you may need automation to do a proper shutdown, because you could be looking at a 30-second time where you have to actually have a full shutdown before you start having impact to your devices. Right now we're seeing that that's a little bit longer. 30 to 60 seconds, you can actually still have what we call human in the loop interaction. So you can actually look at it, go, okay, maybe the fluid is doing, you know, it's not leaking as badly as we thought it was. We can slowly move everything off, or even finish the workload if it's close. But part of this too is that we're doing a lot of work with the Redfish DMTF standard. So we're lucky enough that if you didn't know, some of the people who work for Vertiv helped originate Redfish. And then some of them are actually doing a lot of the heavy standardization right now. One is Mick Jones. He is presenting in about 10 minutes after mine down the hallway. But he has been doing a lot of great work for us and helping us push it into many more devices instead of having a mixed communication environment. So we'll have Redfish on a lot more devices as opposed to just doing SNMP, BACnet, all of those others. And then what we're really trying to work on also is making sure that it's offered as a centralized management and controls platform. Mainly for making sure that we're having all the monitoring done correctly, the energy and power management, those thermal controls, all the way through leak detection. And not just leak detection of fluids, but also refrigerants. Because we all have to know if anything is leaking within our environment. And then again, just continuing this. So we're trying to do end-to-end with everything power and cooling. We already are able to do visualizations on our 3D powertrain, but we're also doing it now with our thermal chain so that you can get visualizations instead of having to actually go and walk around. You can see what's going on at the different checkpoints remotely, which is a lot easier than us walking around the data center always seeing everything. So, all right, and that's everything I got today.